Hello, my name is Alex Barrett, speaking on behalf of my colleagues Austin Pak, Yajing Guo, and Joanne Wang. This presentation investigates the use of virtual reality technology and how that might impact language learners and their intention to adopt that technology for educational purposes. This study was conducted in 2019 and published in a journal called Interactive Learning Environments in 2020. Just to give you some background. Immersive technologies such as virtual reality have been shown to be highly motivating and effective educational tools in enhancing language skills. Furthermore, virtual reality has evolved rapidly over the past 10 years, and the psychological affordances of the technology are understudied in the language learning domain. And using well-established theoretical frameworks for both virtual reality and technology acceptance, this study aims to measure how the unique affordances of VR impact a user's behavioral intention to use the technology for language learning purposes. Our participants were 32 Chinese language learners that were recruited from a non-probability voluntary response from their intensive Chinese language learning program, which was located at a university in mainland China. The average age was about 28 with a standard deviation of 11.2. 21 females, 11 males. About 40% spoke English, and the other 60% spoke a language other than English. They ranked their own Chinese ability as about beginner or intermediate, with 3 of them self-evaluating themselves as advanced. The virtual environment used in this study was a browser-based virtual reality environment called Hubs by Mozilla. And in this environment, users can create their own 3D virtual spaces or use existing 3D virtual spaces created by other users. They can upload their own objects or use existing objects. So you can see here from the user's perspective, they're interacting with some 3D objects and going through a lesson in learning Chinese characters based on their component parts. Within this virtual reality learning environment, they can use a pen like this to draw or trace over things. So you can see here he's tracing a character using a GIF image that demonstrates the brush strokes of that character. You can draw onto pretty much any surface, or you can draw right into the air. And you could also, besides manipulating 3D objects and drawing, just interact with other people as well. So this is a multi-user environment where the learner and the instructor or tutor can be together synchronously and communicate synchronously, either via voice chat or via text. The instrument we used was a 28-item post-participation questionnaire, and we had 7 constructs being measured here, including immersion, interaction, and imagination, perceived ease of use, perceived usefulness, learning motivation, and intention to use, which I will describe in more detail later. The apparatus we used was a Oculus Rift plus Touch VR system, and that is what the learners used to interface with Mozilla Hubs. So it was a full HMD-based high immersion system. We analyzed our post-participation questionnaire using covariance-based structural equation modeling using AMIS software. Our model placed the qualities of VR as external exogenous variables This included interaction, immersion, and imagination, which is the most parsimonious kind of theoretical model for encompassing all of what VR might afford to a learner. Davis's 1989 technology acceptance model, a most highly used model investigating technology acceptance, includes perceived usefulness, perceived ease of use, and intention to use. And we also included the motivation to learn, inspired by Keller's ARC model of motivation. So our hypotheses were that, of course, the constructs of virtual reality would positively influence the motivation and perceived ease of use, perceived usefulness, which would in turn positively influence a user's intention to use virtual reality. Here are the results. Pathways that are in the color green are significant, and they're also the beta values are also written here along with the R2 values. Immersion, which is the user's perception of being surrounded by or included in the environment, had a high impact on learning motivation and a moderate impact on perceived usefulness. Interaction, which is the unique affordance of feeling embodied and using the virtual reality environment interface corresponding with the apparatus and so forth, had a high, very large, and significant impact on perceived ease of use. Imagination, which was the ability of the users to kind of imagine or visualize or picture things in their mind that may otherwise have not been programmed or shown to them in the virtual environment. That had a strong impact on the perceived usefulness. Looking at the constructs for the technology acceptance model and learning motivation, perceived usefulness had a high or a moderate significant impact on intention to use, as did learning motivation, but perceived ease of use did not. Looking at the R-squareds of our internal variables here, perceived usefulness had a R-squared of 0.457, which is moderate. Perceived ease of use 0.6, and learning motivation 0.2. Intention to use had a R-squared of 0.6. So what this means for us is that immersion showed to have the most influence in the model. Interaction predictably impacted the perceived ease of use of the system. Imagination predictably impacted the perceived usefulness of the system. Basically, interaction, if it was easy to interact with, the perceived ease of use of the system increased. If users felt that they could picture the Chinese characters and how they interacted and how they functioned, that made the perceived usefulness of the system increase as well. Immersion had a higher impact on perceived usefulness and also learning motivation, but not on perceived ease of use. Looking at the TAM variables, perceived ease of use was only impacted by interaction but had no impact on the intention to use. Perceived usefulness impacted both immersion and imagination, was highly influential on the intention to use. Motivation, number 3 down here, immersion influenced motivation, which in turn influenced the intensity to use, but motivation had the smallest R2 out of all the dependent variables. So in conclusion, we can say that the psychological experience of immersion, which is afforded by the virtual reality technology, warrants further study. This variable seemed to have largest impact as a quality of virtual reality on a user's intention to use this system, and therefore should be looked at maybe a little bit more qualitatively and measured in other ways perhaps. The VR system ease of use does not directly correlate with the language learner's intention to use the technology system for educational purposes. This is a recurring conclusion that we found in the literature. Implications include learners' disregard of the ease or difficulty of the VR system in favor of how useful the system is as a learning technology. In other words, the learner was not put off by whether or not they had trouble interacting with the system or not. They were able to recognize the technology's value as a learning tool, regardless of those influences. And lastly, although the affordance of immersion highly correlated with motivation, the lower R2 of motivation indicates that the III model, which includes interaction, imagination, and immersion, is inadequate in addressing the construct of motivation in terms of virtual reality. There's just a lot more going up there, other unmeasured variables that likely could have informed this model better in terms of motivation. Here are some of the papers that we cited in this presentation. If anybody has any questions, feel free to email me. My email is there on the screen. Thank you very much.